Imagine you are a German soldier in the final months of World War II, hiding in the dark, somewhere near the Rhine River, listening carefully through the night. From across the fields, you hear American tanks grinding forward.
You hear engines coughing, men shouting, trucks moving, radios buzzing with orders, and the heavy metallic sound of an entire U.S. armored division preparing to attack. Your commanders panic. They shift troops, move artillery, prepare defenses, and brace for a massive American assault. But when the sun rises,
there is no army there. No tanks. No thousands of soldiers. No real attack. Only a handful of American artists, actors, radio operators, sound engineers, and stage designers quietly packing up inflatable tanks, fake artillery, giant speakers, and costume patches before disappearing down the road like a traveling circus of war. This was not a legend. This was the Ghost Army. One of the strangest, most brilliant, and most unbelievable true stories in American military history. In 1944, as the Allied forces pushed through Europe after D-Day, the United States Army faced a deadly problem. The Germans were retreating, but they were still dangerous, experienced, and capable of launching brutal counterattacks. Every river crossing, every road, every village, and every patch of forest could become a killing ground. The Allies needed to move fast, but they also needed to confuse the enemy. They needed the Germans to look in the wrong direction, attack the wrong target, defend the wrong road, and fear troops that did not actually exist. So the U.S. military created a secret unit, unlike anything the world had ever seen. Officially, it was called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Unofficially, and much later, people would come to know it by a far more mysterious name: the Ghost Army. The men chosen for this unit were not the kind of soldiers most people imagine when they think of war heroes. Many were artists from New York and Philadelphia. Some were students from art schools. Some were designers, architects, illustrators, photographers, radio specialists, actors, and engineers. Among them were men who would later become famous in American culture, including fashion designer Bill Blass, painter Ellsworth Kelly, and photographer Art Kane. But in 1944, they were young men in uniform, carrying sketchbooks as well as rifles, and their mission was not to destroy the enemy with firepower. Their mission was to defeat the enemy's imagination. They were trained to create illusions on a battlefield, not small tricks, not simple camouflage. They were trained to make a few hundred men look and sound like tens of thousands. They learned how to impersonate entire divisions. They studied how real military units moved, talked, parked, rested, and fought. They copied the shoulder patches of famous American divisions. They painted fake unit markings on vehicles. They drove in circles through towns so civilians and spies would see them again and again and believe a huge force had arrived. They staged fake traffic jams. They left false signs. They created fake headquarters. They even pretended to be generals, officers, and military police. Every detail mattered, because one mistake could expose the deception and get real American soldiers killed. Their most famous tools looked almost ridiculous up close. They used inflatable tanks, inflatable trucks, inflatable artillery, and even inflatable airplanes. From a distance, especially through binoculars or aerial reconnaissance, these rubber dummies looked real. A fake Sherman tank could be carried by just a few men, placed in a field, inflated, and arranged to look like part of a powerful armored force. The men would cover tracks, create fake tire marks, and position the dummies carefully so enemy scouts would see exactly what they were supposed to see. Sometimes, strong winds caused the fake tanks to wobble or flip, and the soldiers had to rush out and fix them before anyone noticed. It was warfare with the logic of a magic show,
The enemy's eyes had to be led exactly where the illusionists wanted them to go. But the Ghost Army did not rely on sight alone. They understood that war was not only seen, it was heard. So they used one of the most advanced sound deception systems of the time. Sound engineers recorded real tanks, trucks, bridge building equipment, and marching soldiers. These recordings were made on special equipment and played through powerful speakers mounted on half-tracks. At night, the Ghost Army could broadcast the sounds of a massive armored column moving into position. The noise could carry for miles. Imagine being an enemy soldier in the darkness, hearing engines growl, tracks clatter, and orders echo across the countryside. Even if you saw nothing, your mind would fill in the rest. Fear would do the Ghost Army's work for them. Radio deception was another weapon. In World War II, enemy intelligence listened constantly to radio traffic. Every military unit had patterns, call signs, habits, rhythms, code procedures, the personality of operators. The Ghost Army's radio teams learned to imitate these patterns. They created fake conversations between fake units, sending messages that suggested troop movements that were not happening. If the Germans believed a certain American division was preparing an attack in one area, they might move forces there, leaving the real target weaker. The Ghost Army was not just building fake objects, they were building a fake reality, one signal at a time. Their work was unbelievably dangerous. They were often placed close to the front lines because the illusion had to be near enough for the Germans to believe it. They did not have the firepower of a real division. If the enemy attacked them directly, they could be crushed. Their protection was the deception itself. They had to act confident, even while knowing that if the Germans discovered the truth, the game could turn deadly in minutes. In some operations, they were pretending to be units far larger and stronger than they really were, standing like actors on a stage, where the audience had artillery. One of their most remarkable missions came in March 1945, during Operation Viersen. The Allies were preparing to cross the Rhine River, one of the final major barriers into Germany. A real crossing could be extremely costly if the Germans knew where to concentrate their defenses. The Ghost Army was ordered to help convince the enemy that a large American force was gathering in one place, while the actual attack would happen elsewhere. They moved into position and created the illusion of two divisions, roughly tens of thousands of men, with only a fraction of that number. They inflated tanks and artillery. They set up fake camps. They played the sounds of trucks, tanks, and construction. They filled the air with fake radio traffic. They wore patches from real units. They made themselves visible just enough to be believed. The deception worked.
German forces paid attention to the Phantom Army.
The real Allied crossing took place with less resistance than expected. The Ghost Army had helped manipulate the enemy's decisions without firing a major shot. It was a victory of creativity over brute force, of theater over steel, of imagination over fear. Historians later estimated that the Ghost Army's operations may have saved thousands of Allied lives. Exact numbers are impossible to prove because the greatest success of deception is measured in disasters that never happen, ambushes that never form, and battles that are never fought. What makes the story even more astonishing is that for decades, almost nobody knew about it. The men came home after the war and went back to ordinary American life. Some became artists, designers, architects, businessmen, and teachers. They had carried one of the strangest secrets of World War II, but they were not allowed to talk about it. Their missions remained classified for many years. Families knew only pieces. Friends heard hints. A man might say he served in Europe, but he could not fully explain that he had once helped create an imaginary army with rubber tanks and recorded thunder. Think about what that silence meant. In movies and history books, war is often remembered through battles, generals, weapons, and dramatic charges. But these men had fought with creativity. They had used the skills of painters, stagehands, radio performers, and engineers to protect soldiers they would never meet. They had turned art into armor. They had made lies serve the truth. They had proven that in war, the mind can be as important as the machine gun, and a carefully designed illusion can change the movement of armies.
The Ghost Army also tells us something deeply American. It was bold, strange, practical, inventive, and a little bit absurd. It took men who might have spent their lives drawing advertisements, designing clothing, painting canvases, or building theater sets, and placed them in one of the most serious conflicts in human history. Then, it asked them to do something that sounded impossible: make the enemy believe in an army that was not there. And they did it. Not once, but again and again across Europe, in a series of deception operations that helped protect real troops and speed the Allied advance. There is a moment that captures the spirit of the Ghost Army perfectly. During one operation, the men had set up a fake military presence near the front. Their job was to appear loud, busy, and important. They drove trucks back and forth. They made noise. They wore the wrong patches on purpose because they wanted spies and observers to report that a specific unit had arrived. They had to behave like soldiers from a much larger force, even though their entire performance was built on the hope that the Germans would never look too closely. It was dangerous, almost unbelievable, and yet it worked, because war is full of uncertainty. Commanders rarely see the whole battlefield. They depend on reports, sounds, sightings, radio signals, rumors, and assumptions. The Ghost Army attacked those assumptions. Their story forces us to rethink what courage looks like. Courage is not always charging into gunfire. Sometimes courage is standing beside an inflatable tank and hoping the enemy believes it is real. Sometimes courage is broadcasting the sound of a fake army while knowing real artillery could answer back. Sometimes courage is pretending to be stronger than you are so that someone else, somewhere else, gets a... Today, the Ghost Army stands as one of the most amazing examples of military deception in modern history. It reminds us that truth can sometimes be defended by carefully crafted illusion. It shows that creativity is not soft. Art is not useless. Imagination is not childish. In the right hands, imagination can move armies, protect lives, and shape the outcome of history. So the next time you see a painting, a movie set, a sound studio, a designer's sketch, or a magician's trick, remember this. In the fields and forests of Europe, during the most destructive war the world had ever seen, a small group of Americans used those same creative skills to face down one of the most dangerous military machines in history. They did not have the numbers the enemy feared. They did not have the tanks the enemy heard. They did not have the army the enemy saw. But they had timing, discipline, nerve, and imagination. And for a few crucial nights in World War II, that was enough to make ghosts win a war.
Thanks for listening to History. Must stay with me for next valuable historical video. Thank you.